Good morning to the entire community of Team 5 and beyond. This is your man, Austin Billions. Today is 1st of September 2020, our supposed day of the official launch of the Power of Two. But incidentally, there is a good news and there is a bad news. The good news is that our Power of Two will be coming up any moment, and the bad news is that the launching of this Power of Two has been extended for technical reasons. This will enable the developers to restructure the program to give us maximum satisfaction. So guys, I'm appealing to you on this record that we should be patient with the developers so that they give us the best of what they can offer. But for the meantime, I want us to do a little bit of review about the Power of Two, so I can call it Power of Two Prelaunch Review. Now, on this Power of Two Prelaunch Review, I want us to look at a critical aspect of the Power of Two, with a perceived mistake or error that leaders have been doing in the marketing of the Power of Two. So this review we are going to have today will give us a little bit of more understanding. So I beg for your time, more understanding about the Power of Two. Now, without wasting the time, the Power of Two is divided into three categories. Category 1 is the power line. The power line. Then 2 is the X factor. Then 3 is the X prime. So I want us to explain one more time. I know that we have been explaining the power line, the X factor, the X prime for so many times, but there is an ongoing mistake people have been making in the explanation of the Power of Two. I want to correct in my own little way for us to understand much more better what the Power of Two simply means. Now, we said in the quick one, the power line is the global community of the members of the Power of Two. The X factor is the home, is the abridged body between, is the abridged branch between the power line and the X prime. So we'll call it the matrix. Now, the third one is the X prime. Now, having understood that the power line is the entire global members of the Power of Two, I would like us to clear what we have on the board so that we move into X factor. I am particularly interested in the X factor because of the error going on even among the ranks of the leaders. So by this, let's start from the X factor. X factor. What is the X factor? The X factor on its own has three branches in the power line. Now, the first branch is the matrix. Then the second branch of the X factor is what I call the upper slot. And then the third one is what I call the lower slot. Guys, as you can see on the board, the X factor is better defined from the standpoint of three branches: the matrix, the upper slot, and the lower slot, as against the prevailing teaching that the Power of Two is majorly divided into X factor and the X prime. Now, there has been a wrong interpretation trying to coin X factor and X prime. No, they do not connect. They have their different standpoints. By the time we explain what the matrix is, what the upper slot is, and what the lower slot is in the Power of Two, we'll be able to understand when we are defining and describing the x prime. So let's go, guys. So the next thing we need to do here is, let us build the x factor. How does the x factor develop? The x factor, for instance, we have Mr. A here. Mr. A starts the power of 2 and got Mr. B and then Mr. C. Now, we were told that when you come into the power of 2 with the usual entry fee of $10, that the $10 activates your account in x factor and x prime, which is correct. But where we are going to correct some error there is in the building of the matrix. Now, in the building of the matrix, when Mr. A comes in with $10 and the system was able to get 2 people from the power line, putting into the left wing and the right wing of Mr. A, you find out that Mr. A, who has $0.0, now has earned $10. Now, because the system continued to give each member 2 downline, so Mr. B will then get D and then E, while C will get F and G. So from this illustration, you find out that Mr. A has earned $10. Now, when Mr. A earned $10, what Mr. A is left on his own hours to decide what he is going to do with $10. Let's assume you are the Mr. A. You come into the power line with your $10, and after the system has given you 2 people, which enable you to earn $10 from the left wing. So let's assume you are that person. You now have $10, and the question now is, what next are you going to do with your $10? It is either that you spend it, but the system is telling you that there's an option for you to invest that $10 if you want to. So that if you are that person who want to take the option of reinvestment, this will take you into the option of the 2 main slots of the X factor. So let's build the slots together. We'll now say the upper slot. The upper slot, each of the slot is made up of 10 blocks. Now we have 1. Let's make it a little bolder. I hope you're capturing well. Let's make it a little bolder. This is our pre-launch review. It's important we pay attention to what we are about to demonstrate here for the avoidance of the mistake we are making in this program. Now, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I call it the upper slot. Some people call it the X factor. The X factor. Then let's go to the lower slot. So we'll build our block. Are you seeing it? Talk. Are you seeing it?
Yes.
Okay. If you're not seeing it, you let me know, because I want my people to see this. Now, you see that this is the upper slot. I call it the upper slot, and this is the lower slot, all under X factor. But what people say, And what most of the messages we are getting in the room is that this is the X factor and this is the X prime. I just wanted to correct this impression that there is no X prime here. This is not X prime. And I will show you why I said this is not X prime. Instead of calling it X prime, we'll call it a part of the X factor. We could call it the lower slot, the down slot. You can call it any name of your choice, but it is part of the X factor. So now, Mr. A, who has $10, will then come here because the moment Mr. A registers in the power of 2, it is said that X factor is activated, X prime is activated. The activation of the X factor covers the first bridge, which is $5, $10, $20, $40, $80. No, you can have $160 because each block is a double of the previous. So that if you have 5, you will have 10, you have 20, it's always double. I hope you understand. So then we'll come down below and said 5, 10, 20, 40, 80, 160. That's 320. 320. But let us just
640. 1,280.
Okay, it's all right. I hope you all understand. So now, the moment Mr. A activates his account and upgraded, the X prime is activated. Maybe in another video we'll explain the X prime in details. But right now let's focus on X factor. Now, the $5 that activates your X factor takes care of the upper slot and the lower slot. Okay? It takes care of the upper slot and the lower slot. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So now that Mr. A has earned $10 and Mr. A is not ready to spend his $10, rather he wants to use his $10 to maximize profit based on the advantage of reinvestment provided by the power of 2 through the slot system. So Mr. A can decide to come and buy this slot. Once he buys this slot, he is not left with 0 naira. It means that Mr. A has what? Reinvested. So now that Mr. B has gotten 2 from the system, Mr. B will earn $10. Likewise, the system was nice enough to also provide 2 downline for Mr. C, and Mr. C earns $10. You see, below A are 2 people who have earned $10 each. At this point, Mr. B happens to be that kind of person who wants to do exactly what Mr. A has done or what Mr. A did. So Mr. B would open his own back office and go to his own upper slot and buy slot. Let's assume this is Mr. B's back office. So Mr. B will buy $10 slot, which is the second level. Once Mr. B does that, the income, that money that Mr. B spent in that investment, goes to Mr. A. So Mr. A will now earn $10 again. Right? I hope you're understanding.
Yes.
Okay. Now, Mr. C, from his own room, he goes into his office. He goes into his back office and decided to upgrade by activating the stage 2. So this $10 is also coming to Mr. A. So we now have plus $10 again, right? So equals to $20. So if you are that Mr. B, if you are that Mr. A, you have $20 and you say, what should you do with this $20? Would you want to keep it to solve your immediate needs, or you want to reinvest it? Then I will stop at this. I want us to get to this point because there's something we're going to open up here. Now, you could decide to take this $20 to activate the second stage, which is $10 under the lower slot. Now you can see where the error is. When we call this the X prime, I feel it is an error because this income is coming from X factor to activate the lower part of the X factor. Why should we call it the X prime? Why should we call it the X prime? It is not in the category of the X prime. It is not under the umbrella of the X prime, and it should not be considered as a part of the X prime. Rather, we should call it a part of the X factor. So considering it to be the lower slot of the X factor, I think is correct. So this Mr. A can activate the lower part of the X factor with $10. He can as well decide not to activate the lower part, but rather use the whole $20 to activate the stage 3 of the upper slot. If Mr. A does that, Mr. A will be left with, how much will Mr. A will left with?
$0.
So Mr. A will be equals to $0. So now, this is one thing that is interesting about the power of 2. Now, we understand that the management of the power of 2, as they have extended the launch of this program, part of the reason they want to extend the launch is to give members the ample opportunity to activate all slots in a go. Well, as we hope that they get done on time and come live for us to really kickstart this wonderful project. So let us explain what was the position as it stands right now. So as the matrix extend, how do we mean? When Mr. D, this marker is getting exhausted. So when Mr. D gets GH, also we have H here, GH, I, then we have I here, then we have J, then we have K. So as the matrix continue to build, each of these persons will continue to end. Now as they end, they would eventually come to buy the slot that Mr. A has already acquired. So if Mr. B and C, who earn from D, E, F, and G, wishes to buy, because they have already bought the second slot, now they are coming into the third slot, meaning that each of them will be buying $20. Each of them will be buying this third slot, which was $20. It means that Mr. B will pay $20. Once Mr. B activates the third slot from his back office, it's Mr. A that will earn it, and that will be how much?
20.
That will be $20. $20. Then when Mr. C
wants to upgrade to
goes to his back office to upgrade the slot 3, now Mr. C has activated.
Yeah.
Now the $20 he uses to buy the third slot comes to Mr. A, so that Mr. A will now have. So if you add up the first $20 and the last $20, how much will it be?
$40.
So Mr. A will now be $40 rich. But this is where I want to stop on this record, because as it stands right now, you cannot buy 3 slots at a go ahead of the lower slot. So what Mr. A would do is to come down to the lower slot and buy this $10. The second slot is $10 and the third slot is $20. So Mr. A would minus $30 from his $40. $30. Mr. A will be left with how much?
$10.
$10. So for now, so far so good. Mr. A will be $10 rich, but highly invested in both the upper slots of the X factor and the lower slot of the X factor. Now, I said I will be running up this record here, but for you to completely understand that there is a difference between the X factor and the X prime is for us to show that the lower slot, let me stop at this. The lower slot, what I call the lower slot, is not part of the X prime. The X prime has a horizontal table. So this is Mr. A. Mr. A was the man used to illustrate the table of the matrix in the X factor. Now let's assume Mr. A steps up his game and said he wants to be a builder in the power of 2, and eventually recruited, let's say, 5 people. He brought in 5 people into the power of 2. Now the 5 people are arranged horizontally. Let's say 1. Matthew. Sorry, don't worry. I'm getting a better ink so we can round up this record. So let's say Mr. A brings in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 people into the power of 2. So now, you see, this is the table of the X prime. So, but even though the people he brings are arranged horizontally, his income comes vertically. So the income is a function of what each of the persons that are arranged in the horizontal line, what each of them does determine what Mr. A will earn. If Mr. Number 1 brings in 3 people, Mr. A will earn 10%, 10% here, 10% here, 10% here. So their entry fee, Mr. A will get it 10% from each of them. If Mr. 2 brings in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, he gets 10% here, he gets 10% here, he gets 10% here, 10% here, and 10% here. But if Mr. 3 brings in 2 people, 1, 2, he gets 10% here and 10% here. So if Mr. 4 brings nobody, he gets nothing. If Mr. 5 brings in nobody, he gets nothing until they begin to work. So you see that this block is completely different from the X factor. So at this point, I would like to end this record here so that it doesn't last too long. But I want to believe that with this review, we can now understand that the power of 2 functions in 3 dimensions: the power line, the X factor, and the X prime. The X factor, the power line, is the global community of people in the form of a serial number 1 to the last number that join the community. It is from this number of people that every other thing happens. like the X factor, is built on the basis of the entering into the power line. But what makes the power line build is the activity that is carried out in the department of the X prime. So we said in the X factor, it is divided into three categories: the matrix, the upper slot, and the lower slot. All of these are avenues for members to make money. I want to personally invite you to subscribe to this channel if you are seeing our video for the very first time, and also hit the red bell there below so that you can get a notification each time we come online, each time we upload the video. For the presentation of the power line of POWEROF2, it is most awesome program in the world today, disruptive and taking over places. We just have to be patient with the program to come up at the best form that we can ever have it. So thank you for watching this video. Stay blessed. Let's meet at the chat room.